All right, so maybe I should do a mic check and a screen check first. So can you guys just give me a thumbs up if everything is okay? The sound is okay, the screen is okay, just a thumbs up will do. Yeah, thanks. At least I can see. Okay, great. Oh, now we have around 79 students. So maybe we just wait because our class actually have 200 plus students. So maybe I will just wait for another 5 minutes to see if at least the counter will increment to 100 or something. All right. So yeah, because today actually we have quite a lot of things to cover. So, and I also want to finish the slides on time so that we will not keep you for too long. So otherwise I might most probably overrun again. So, okay, maybe I will just wait for another 3 minutes, 4 minutes, then we will start at 4:05. Okay, thanks. All right. While we are still waiting for 30 more seconds, so just to share with you, so your quiz mark is already announced, right? So just double check if you can see your grades, your quiz marks. And also remember that it's already after the recess week. So that means that your next deliverable due date is around 3 weeks from now. And what I can see in some of the GitHub report is that actually some of the team are making very good progress. So just to remind you, so the team only have around 3 weeks left for your next deliverables. And by right, actually, you need to frozen your development, or actually you should complete your development when you submit your second deliverables report. All right. So just to share with you. Oh, okay, I don't know. So this is normal, right? Around half of the classes attending the lectures. I'm not sure if it is okay or not. But again, because we have to start already. So again, welcome to my turn. So after the recess week, basically we need to already discuss a little bit more about the implementations as well as some of the coding practice. Although actually I cannot do a lot of things because different teams might actually use different programming language as well as development framework. But however, I will just try my best to actually go through all the important concepts and then actually what you need to aware for your development and implementations. Okay. So introductions to CI/CD, which is the very first lectures after your recess week. Okay, yeah, I don't know if you watch this or not. Okay, I think actually it's good. 4 years old can already do coding, right? So okay. So here's today's agenda. So at least we need to give an introductions of what is DevOps, and I believe that actually because this is a SSD, right? So I actually need to introduce, or you should already heard about DevSecOps or DevOpsSec, right? So this is something that you need to know. And then second thing is that we need to discuss about the CI/CD pipeline and security as well, which actually we need to integrate security elements in the CI/CD pipeline. And then we need to actually go through some of the review of the securities and also the password storage as well. Actually, so to refresh your memories on why actually we need to have SSL, TLS, as well as how you're going to do the password storage as well. And last but not least, so the most important thing that I would like to introduce in this lectures is passwordless system, because in the coming years, right, I believe that this will become a very common practice that we actually remove the entire password and then we need to implement a passwordless system. So how we're going to do it, or how those big giants are currently implementing it, is something that I want to mention in this lecture as well. All right. So again, I believe that some of the students might still concurrently attending the Intro to Software Engineering, which is 2X01. But again, I believe that most of you should still remember the concept of waterfall, agile, and DevOps. So why actually we have 3 different life cycles is mainly because the old way to do things is waterfall, because then actually we have enough time for us to do the design and coding as well as testing and deploy. And then agile, why actually agile become famous is because we try to reduce the time for the coding. And then actually in the meantime, we will try to do some testing in between. And then we need to also review the design if necessary. Why agile is become more and more famous is that we might not have sufficient time to actually plan for a good design, as well as we might want to actually see the outcome before our actual product. So actually that's why agile is becoming more and more famous. And then last but not least, why we need to mention about DevOps is that now actually the future trend is that even the deployment. So you can see, right, agile actually what is the difference between agile and let me use a pen. So what actually is the difference between agile and DevOps is that for agile, right, at least the deployments will all still be the very end of the life cycle. But why DevOps is become more and more famous is because now we actually have the deployment in just like the agile style, is that we after the testing, after the coding and testing, right, then we will already deploy the applications. No matter actually that some design is not confirmed or actually the testing might not be completed. But however, because we want to roll out the application as soon as possible, right? Then that's the reason why actually DevOps now become more and more famous. So what actually Agile is becoming more and more famous is because the developer actually become the operating team as well. So if there's any bug, so actually the developers has to fix it as well. So DevOps may be considered as an extended Agile beyond the software team. So that means that the software team actually have extra tasks to do, which is the deployment. And that's why CI/CD become more and more important and famous nowadays. So, all right. So introductions to DevOps and DevSecOps, right? So what actually is DevOps and DevSecOps? So DevOps actually is the process of continuously improving the software applications with small change and small risk. So what does it mean? That means that we actually allows some small change, and also we might allow some bug, or actually if there's something that's unstable, or we call it some beta features or preview feature, we will just leave it there and we will just roll it out first, because without the users report or actually testing, or we are not actually saying that user as a tester UAT, but however, why DevOps becomes more and more famous is that there's some preview feature or some unstable features that's not well tested, designed. Sometimes actually we will just roll it out first and we will just implement small change at a time. Actually, why it is famous is mainly because then we can make use of the user as a testing, as to test the features whenever we can also receive some feedback from the users as well. Instead of every time there's a change, there's a huge version update, we will roll out all the features and we will wait until the features is being mature. Nowadays, we will just roll it out first, and then to see if there's any feedback or any complaint from the users, then we will change it accordingly. So that's why DevOps actually is something that's very famous nowadays, so to say. And then again, there's some reference material for you guys to know why actually DevOps is now so famous nowadays. So what actually DevOps is currently doing, so it's actually quite similar to what you learn in your 2101 to 201. In fact, everything is still similar, so to say. Let me try to make my screen smaller. Okay. So as you can see, right, so in a traditional so what actually a DevOps includes is that we will have the planning, and then we need to code it, which I believe that most of you should already do some coding for this phase already. And then subsequently will be the build, and then test and release and deploy and monitor, operate and monitor. So why DevOps is using this so-called life cycle is mainly because at least the development basically also need to involve in the release, deploy, operate, and monitor. So if there's something wrong in the operations, right, then the developer basically need to again go back to the plan and code, and then to do bug fixing, to do feature enhancement, and then you need to build it and test it again. So this is actually what the traditional DevOps operating life cycle. So what actually, if it is a DevSecOps, so DevSecOps basically again is similar to what you learned in the first half, is that we need to include a lot of security elements in the DevOps life cycle. So for example, like in the planning, right, I believe that you still remember Prof. Tran mentioned about the threat model, and also policy is something similar to your requirements. And then in next lecture, is it? Oh, no, I think it's around 2 lectures from now, right? Then we will need to actually mention about the standard analysis. And then in your deliverable tree, then you also need to do code review as well. So, and then subsequently the build, and then the team basically also need to do some, we will not call it penetration testing for this module. We will call it a quality assurance, and actually is a security acceptance test, SAT. So, and then the team basically also need to check whenever the compliance or validations during the release phase, as well as you might have log and auditing during your deployment phase. Last but not least, in the operations, right? You might need to have threat intelligence, and you need to monitor, and you might also need to do incidents response and recovery as well. So what actually is DevSecOps is that, so the team initially is only, if it is a waterfall, right? The developer actually only develop the app, and actually they don't need to handle the operations. So for DevOps, right, that means that the developer now actually need to be involved in the operations. And DevSecOps, that means that they also need to involve in the code review. They need to do some testing, and they may need to ensure the log and monitor whenever the app actually is running normally or not. So DevSecOps or DevOffset or DevOps, I think there's a lot of different orders. But however, it is actually a general term to increase the security, as this is also the key point of this module, right? So we need to increase securities and compliance in the DevOps life cycle. So that's why we need to learn it as well. All right. So in fact, as you might know, right, because we are going to talk about CI/CD. So in fact, we are not having enough time to mention all the tools which is meant for the CI/CD. But in this module, what we are trying to do is that we will, at least we already mentioned something related to Docker, right? We are also already start to mentioning Jenkins, which is actually a tools for you to manage your CI/CD. Subsequently, when we talk about testing, right, then Selenium and JUnit will be something that you might need to know. Or I believe that for SE software engineering students, you might already learn more software testing tools to test whenever your software is running correctly or not. And I'm also trying to see if I can mention something related to Ansible or Kubernetes. But however, I don't think I believe that I might only have one lecture to cover if possible. But in the meantime, at least you might need to know about that. You have a lot of tools to manage or to actually help you to create your CI/CD for your applications. Okay, I forgot to mention, so you guys should know about Git, right? So I don't think that will be something that is something that you don't know. All right. So when we talk about CI/CD pipeline and securities, right? So why actually we need to use CI/CD if it is a DevOps or DevSecOps? Is because actually the main one key methodologies is that, because now you will say that, oh, Raymond, so previously I'm just a developer, right? Now I also need to be involved in deployment and operations and securities. So I have a lot of things to do. Actually, I might not be able to do so. Previously, I only need to manage my Git, right? So what actually I need to do is that I only push my Git on the repo. I do the unit testing on my own, and then I push the code on the repo, and I build up the staging or testing environment and to do a UAT, right? But now actually I have to involve in so many new things. So how actually I can do it? So the one key methodologies that we want to emphasize is that this module is that we basically need an automations tool to implement the continuous integrations and continued delivery or even deployment. So the CI/CD, the D actually is not only meant for delivery, but for deployment as well. So you might assume what will be happening is that if you create your CI/CD in a very, very automated manner, right? So just give you guys a quick glance of what you might be able to do is that once you push your code on the Git repo, right? Then the CI/CD will automatically help you to do all the security validations, automatically conduct all the unit testing and JUnit and security testing as well. And then if they pass all those kind of testing and requirements, it will also automatically do the deployment to your actually even to your operation environment. So you can see, right, what actually for continuous integrations is that for the dev team, right? So continuous integrations is that I need to do applications testing and I need to do the integration testing to see whenever my functions or my class are implemented correctly. So it might still automatically trigger is that, so what actually is meaning for continuous delivery is that it will also automatically do the acceptance test if you write all the test case in the correct manner. And last but not least, for the continuous deployment is that it will also automatically push your latest versions to the production's environment. If the acceptance test is the acceptance test actually can pass through. So what is the difference between continuous deliveries and continuous deployment? Is that delivery might only be the case is that once you pass through the acceptance test, right, then that's all. But however, if you can manage it to do the continuous deployment, that means that it will actually automatically push and compile and deploy and upload your latest versions to the production environment instead of, and I'm not too sure as of now, right? For your development, how manual the process of deployment? Are you actually need to copy and paste your code to the production environment, or actually you need to compile or manually deploy on the team's own? So that's the major difference, is that if you can automate everything, what actually you need to do is to push the code on the repo, and that's all. So why I believe that in the previous lab, so we do mention about Jenkins, which is a tool for you to manage your CI/CD. So what Jenkins can help you to do is that Jenkins basically have a lot of plugins. And in the upcoming labs, as you can see, we are trying to introduce more and more plugins to help you to build up your own CI/CD life cycle. So what you can imagine is that if you can manage to set up the Jenkins correctly, so it might automatically pull the latest code, and then it will build, if it is a Docker image or Docker container, so it will automatically build and config. Subsequently, we will use SonarQube or we will use Selenium to do the security testing, as well as we need to do the unit testing. Last but not least, it might automatically do the deployment in the release, or actually we will use Docker or Kubernetes or GCP or AWS to automatically deploy the code on the DigitalOcean Cloud VM if it is possible. So there's a question for the lab test, Jenkins will be tested or not. So what I will always say, the standard answer is all the things that we mentioned in the labs will be tested again as always. So that will be the case. Hi Prof, are there any theoretical quiz for this second half of the module? There will be no more theoretical, but that's a practical one. So so to say, as we mentioned in the lecture, in Prof Chan's lectures, right? All right. So I have a question for you guys. So again, so I already see some questions, right? So maybe there's some teams already asked me the same questions, is that we have GitHub Actions. Why we are still learning Jenkins? See if any software engineering students or IS students want to answer these questions or not. Or anyone have any idea why we still mention Jenkins instead of GitHub Action? You already learned so many theoretical stuff, right? Yeah, for the next, so Nicholas, I think for the practical test, we will mention the details in the upcoming lectures. But now we might not be able to share too much because we are still in the planning stage. Okay, so because GitHub Action forces people to only use GitHub, correct? So whenever Jenkins they integrate a self-hosted server. So again, what we always want to mention is we cannot rely on something that if it is hosted on a third party, if GitHub is down, then your whole CI/CD will be gone. So same cases, so that's why we introduced Jenkins, is at least everything is under the team's own control, and you can export the things and you can easily import to GitLab, or you want to import in GitHub Action, also possible. So I think, Ryan, you mentioned a very good point, so which is something that I always want to emphasize is that the team should have their full control. Okay, so there's a question, use Jenkins to deploy code, which I'm going to go through in the later slides. Again, it's also a good question though. Okay, so again, in Jenkins, so why we need to mention Jenkins is that the automations of the CI/CD can be specified as a pipeline final. It has use case, it can have extremely comprehensive, but in a case compile something, or you use C to compile something, in the coming next lectures, and you might also need to include some JUnit or Selenium so that you can test. Last but not least will be the deploy. So what you need to do is that there might be an automatic deployment so that you include the SSH information or credential, or actually you will build up a Docker file so that you can deploy your code to the productions or the staging environment. So again, I just want to answer the questions to deploy, right? So for your project or for these deliverables, what we would suggest is that at least it has to be covering the build and test stage for the CI/CD. So that means that at least the build and the testing has to be automatic. So at this stage, we support to have Jenkins already deployed with HTTP reverse with our, or this week, the one. So again, I will not force you to complete anything by this week, but at least by the end of when you submit your deliverable tool, right, which is the deadline is November the 2nd, if I'm not wrong, right? Then at least you have to deploy the Jenkins as well as you should have all the build and tests. Do you need a reverse proxy? If you are using an HTTPS certificate, then you might need a reverse proxy as mentioned by Prof. Tran. So if you want to have a you actually purchase or you subscribe a free HTTPS certificate, you might need a reverse proxies for your Jenkins. So again, please make sure that you also follow the labs as well. Okay. So since at Live Fever, we have a HTTPS reverse tutorial. So yes, I will say, because some of your team want to use a self-site cert, or some of the team already subscribe a free HTTP certificate. So I might say I would suggest you to use HTTPS if possible. But again, as we not mentioned in the as a requirement. So that means that I would suggest, but it is not forcing you guys to have HTTPS reverse proxy for your Jenkins, so to say. So for the pipeline example, so I believe that you will also see this example in your upcoming lab. I think it's next lab or the week next. So what actually you can see in a pipeline is that, so there will be a very, very common stage that I always use when I write the pipeline is that I will check out the code on the Git repo, right? So I will just pull the latest versions on the repo. And then sometimes if you need to do a build, right, if you need to compile something, compiling your library or include your library, you might need a build stage, or you might need to run some shell script. Actually, this is the thing that you might need to include in the build stage. Later on, you will also need to learn about the analysis, which I'm going to cover in lecture 8, is that we need to do statistical analysis to find the static bugs or security issues in the source code. Last but not least, there might be a post that you might also need to export some report, or you need to do a deployment. So this is how a pipeline looks like, which I'm not actually asking the team to implement those. As I mentioned, the team just need to include up to the unit testing instead of there's a post. But this is also an example pipeline for you to understand how the Jenkins CI/CD pipeline works. All right. So because again, you guys already worry, right? So in this module, so what we are trying to focus again, so the CD part, in fact, for us, the delivery and then the deployment, right? I believe that some of the team might not, and actually, so to say, we don't have enough time already. So what we are trying to focus will only be the continuous integration pipeline. So we suggest at least by the deliverable tool, you need to use Jenkins and GitHub for your last exercise as well as your project, so that your Jenkins can automatically pull your source code and then to do some testing on it, and that's all. So we're not asking too much, right? Because I'm pretty sure that we give you guys sufficient time, I hope. So we release a deliverable tool even before the recess week, and which we are trying our best to give you enough time. So, so to say, we cannot extend any more deadline because that will affect the subsequent deliverables as well. Okay, up to this moment, any questions, anything that is related to CI/CD DevOps as of now, or you already learned CI/CD in your other modules that I don't know? Only 160 students. Well, thumbs up if everything is okay. My voice is still clear and not choppy enough. Yeah, because I'm using the old MacBook, so that's why I'm worried if everything is not working. Okay, I can see some thumbs up. Thank you so much. So at least some of you guys are still awake. So next, what I'm going to cover will be the review on the security of the SSL, TLS, and password storage. Just a recap or something that is revising the details that I believe Prof. Chen should mention some of the password and security requirements already. But however, when it always comes to the implementations, again, I always need to repeat again so that I make sure that you guys understand why we need HTTPS and how we handle the password storage. So I believe that not most of you, but all of you are likely to be implement SSL or TLS and slotted password storage, right? If you're not implementing those, I am worried that you might violate your security requirements, so to say. All right. Okay. So that's a question. Maybe I will just answer the question first. Hi, Prof. What's the difference between auto pull GitHub repo every time and there's a new commit and continuous deployment? If the Jenkins pull from the GitHub repo, wouldn't the program already auto deploy the existing infrastructure? Okay, so Catherine, so I think it's a good question. So that means that I will use me as an example when I try to actually I will also do auditing while I also do some development tasks, right? So again, so if it is a developer, right, we will always put the code to be deployed on the dev branch. And then for the CI/CD, right, in the Jenkins, we will solely use staging branch. So that means that because right, when we do some bug fixing and then if every time the Jenkins automatically pull the dev branch and do the CI/CD testing, right, it might affect the operation environment already, which is not we want, right? We want to at least confirm that the code is good enough or not. So that's why usually what we did is that the developers will pull the code on the dev branch, and there should be one, or at least there will be some guy in your team to validate and verify that, oh, okay, this dev branch is good enough to be merged into the staging branch. If it is the case, right, then once they pull from the staging branch, then the Jenkins will automatically do the CI/CD for your staging branch. So that actually how it works. Again, it's management. It's not actually something that's it's not a technical problem, but however, it's always the case how you manage your repo. All right, I hope I answered your questions correctly, right? Okay, yeah. So I hope you understand where I come from. So that's why, again, so in professional lectures, remember how we manage the Git repo, that's different branch, is mainly because we need to confirm that at least your CI/CD should focus on the staging run or UAT run instead of the dev branch. Okay, so we go back to the lectures again. So I believe that I'm not believing that I'm pretty sure that you are going to implement TLS and you are using sorted password for storage as what you, because otherwise you're not fulfilling your security requirements, I believe, right? But again, what I'm trying to say here is that are they effective or not, about the effectiveness. So again, as always, right, we will always say is that we will always hear news about, for example, like largest password compilations, and then there's a lot of password data leakage, even LinkedIn and MS Team, and then for Zoom, there's no, but you can see, right, again, there's always the password compilation is that some of the applications is still storing plain text password all the time. So again, that I remember that Prof. Cham also mentioned about the Starbucks issues, right? The Singapore Starbucks case. So that's why, although we keep mentioning that to secure your applications, but I really don't know why is that every day or every month I will receive some of the applications that actually store your password in plain text, which I'm not here. I hope actually that will not be the case for you guys, because you guys are going out for IWSP already. So if it is the case, this will be a huge problem. All right. Again, so why actually we need 2FA is mainly because it's that at least password is not the only authenticators, but for example, like OCBCs, they might still use OTP, but now actually they're not using the hardware token, but at least back to around 5 to 10 years ago, now, why actually the hardware code token is being introduced is mainly is because password cannot be the single authenticator for you guys anymore. And then now actually later on when I mentioned about the passwordless system and why I need to mention this is that we are trying to bring hardware token back, not back to the stage again. So that's why we sometimes actually you can see right in here, why actually they might need to use on-screen keyboard instead of the physical keyboard. For IS students, I believe why we need to use on-screen keyboard instead of we type on our keyboard. Keylogger, right? Yes. So that's why in the old days we have on-screen keyboard. It's mainly because I don't know. So you guys might need to implement an on-screen keyboard to prevent keyloggers or not. But again, it might actually affect the usability. So as I always mention. Okay, so that's why always the case is that if TLS and OTP are effective, right, then why always phishing attack is always possible today, nowadays. I believe that I received this SIT virtual conference 2 months ago. I think it looks like exactly the same as the original, the correct room, but however you can see in here, the O actually is 0. And then I believe that most of our faculty and some of our students also received this one. And then so I can say phishing attack is always so attractive. And then if I type the password, then my SIT account will be compromised. So that's why I say phishing attack is always effective. It's because we always request, even the OPTP. In fact, what I need to do is that I just do a post-it and then I forward to the correct website. And then I might be able to retrieve the OTP if it is the case. So again, phishing attack is something that is still possible nowadays and it's hard to prevent. And that's why actually it's an issue when you think of your implementation, how you are going to at least address or mitigate phishing attack if it is the case. So, and then another issue is that people sometimes are also not aware, even developer might be unaware of the incompatibilities of the security and password protocols and also the password storage as well. So for example, like I would say still many of the applications is using SAR1 or hashed SAR1, which as a student, you need not to worry too much. I believe that your team's corresponding IS students should tell you which kind of hashing algorithm that you should use, or which kind of authentication protocol or key exchange protocol that you have to use. So I will not go into the detail because this is not an applied cryptography modules. But again, this is something that is always becoming a problem. Is that, for example, like once there's a new hashing algorithm is being compromised, then how are we going to review or update our security algorithm, hashing algorithms to the latest one? It's always becoming the issues and problems. So if implementing sorted password storage, right, you will have no options but to require the users to send their password in clear or in plain text, so that your server, once your server receives the password, right, it can do the correct hashings to see whenever the password is the correct one or not. So if it is not protected by so-called HTTPS, then actually the password will say in plain text. And then if someone can be sitting in the middle or sniff the password, right, there's a problem that, oh, okay, the password is being exposed to the third party. So that is always the problem, is that if we allow the password to send through over HTTP, then the attacker basically should be able to capture and sniff it, which will become the problem. So actually, as a result, right, so phishing attack is always still remains visible, because I would use another website, or we use the HTTP one, and then I sniff it and I capture the password. Then what I need to do is that I would use the capture the username and password and try to see if I can access to the correct website or not. So that's something that is hard to prevent. But however, what we have to do, or in the implementation phase, what you must do is that at least you need to enforce using HTTPS, which is the secure socket layer, or the TLS. But however, you're trying to implement password encryption within security SSL and TLS is useless, because some of the team already telling me, right, oh, I will Prof. Maywer, what I will try to do is that I will use a JavaScript encryption library to actually perform encryptions. Even actually I use a HTTPS or TLS. So then I will just use my own implementations of encryptions to become the extra layers that is beyond the TLS. But every time I will say to them is that you actually complicating yourself, is because then how you do the key exchange, and then how you can make sure that your JavaScript library is working or not. Or sometimes you expose your encryption algorithms because you implement everything in your JavaScript libraries, right? So again, if you can ensure that your applications can run on top, only run on TLS, and if it is a correct the certificate signer, right, then you basically need not to actually implement or trying to innovate one encryption libraries on your own, but you just need to ensure that the applications actually need to be running on top of TLS. But again, if it is IS students, right, you might know about the SSL stripping attacks, which actually is someone that's sitting in the middle to pretend to be the correct website, right? Assuming that if the client is trying to query the HTTP version of the website, and there's someone that's sitting in the middle and actually to query the correct server, and then the man in the middle guy will actually request for the secure one, and then it will basically interact on behalf of you, because it is called an SSL stripping attack, is that the client basically don't know there's someone sitting in the middle to pretend to be the correct servers. And then that means that the man in the middle guy basically can sniff and capture all the communications and informations before you send to the correct server. So why I need to mention about the implementations is that you need to make sure, at least for something right, you need to implement the HTTP strict transport security HSTS to ensure that the communications between the client and the server has to be used HTTPS, and the certificate actually is signed by a trusted signer. All right, so at least you need to have the Chrome or your Safari or your Edge browser have to guarantee that actually that is signed by the trusted authorities, instead of this is a self-signed cert, or actually this cert cannot be trusted, or the cert cannot be verified that can be trusted. So, and then what actually it will happen is that the browser will tell you that you might need to use a HTTPS communications instead of they can still use the HTTP connections. So this is something that in your implementation, something you actually need to be aware, and you might need to ask your corresponding IS student to ensure that the configurations of your web servers has to be configured in a secure manner, so to say. So again, so this module, because it's not an applied cryptography modules, so what I will always suggest is that you might continue to implement so you might actually continue to implement TLS, but do note that actually you need to support those cyber shoot that is considered as secure. So what actually a cyber shoot is, that just for the SC students reference, is that it is actually a key exchange and authentication protocols together with encryption and hashing algorithms to make sure that your communications and your connections actually is secure. So I will not go into the detail, otherwise you will be super confused. But I will always say is that please ask your team's IS students to share with you how to implement TLS on your web server. Okay, again, why we need to also mention about this is because because Snowden now in 2015, right, it mentioned that there actually is a global mesh surveillance in all around the world, or actually NSA or some of the agency are able to sniff your communication, even if it's a TLS communications. I don't know if it's true or not, but they mentioned about that. They later get the private SSL key to decrypt the data, and they can go back and decrypt past communications for millions of users. Whether you be there for or not, right? But however, there's already some concerns bring up by somebody saying that the powerful guy or powerful agency still managed to break this SSL communications and to collect or to decrypt the communications of the general public. So again, that will be the case that I always need to mention. You might need to see whenever TLS is secure or not. But again, as of now, I can't see any cases that somebody is able to decrypt, at least if it is a trusted, if the certificate is come from a trusted authorities. So again, what you can only do is that you can only configure the TLS to support the cipher suite that is achieve perfect forward security. For example, like the compose of the SSL key will not actually compromise past communications. So that might be something that you might need to know about, that you need to support. So you need to achieve perfect forward security. So again, are there any way that can prevent phishing attacks, man in the middle, or SSL stripping effect and achieve perfect forward security? In fact, the answer is yes. In fact, there is a so-called secure password remote password protocol. So that's called the SRP. So I believe that you should see this in some of the applications, is that you might saying secure remote password protocol. So it will ask you to include the username and password before you can access a website. So what you need to do is that you need to enter username and password before contacting any server. And if the key encryption is successful, the website is authenticated, and the website can be seen. And if not, password will remain safe. So this is so-called the password, the SRP protocols. to actually ensure that you are connecting to a correct website even before you do the handshaking and SSL connections to a particular web server. So in fact, this protocol is already standardized since 2007 and for SSL and TLS. But unfortunately, there's not being updated in the world. So you can see, in fact, there's also a RFC saying that that actually this is for TLS authentications. So why it is not become famous nowadays is that because the website don't know how to authenticate you before you create an account. So if I implement this SRP, right, every time there will be a pop-up box to ask me to input the username and password before I can access the server. But if I'm not a user of that particular server before I want to register an account, right, there's no way for me to enter the website even before I can access it, right? So that's actually the problem of the SRP, and also this is the reason why SRP, although it's already being standardized for an authentications before you access a website, but it is not adapt to the world at all, even at this stage. So that's why why I need to mention this is that this is some of the perfect security is that if I implement the SRP, right, I can actually add a extra protections to protect from SSL stripping attack or actually some of the phishing attack as well. So what I want to say is that reviewing on security of the SSL and TLS and password storage is that, again, for your applications, I believe that you guys are already in the stage of the implementation and coding. So you need to think deeper and not become a follower of the crowd and implement software solutions just for so. To say, oh, Prof. Raymond, what I'm trying to implement is I innovate a new encryption and authentication protocol. Then subsequently, then we will say, oh, there's a lot of problem that you need to deal with, how you do the key exchange. If you implement all your things in your JavaScript library, then an attacker can disclose how you encrypt your communications, and actually this doesn't make any sense. And what is security filter is that is security implemented just for show and to feel safe, or actually you become more and more secure? This will be something that I will always need you guys to go back and think about it. All right. So okay, introduction. Okay. All right, then next we okay, I think maybe this good time for us to have a 8 minutes break. Then when we come back from the break, then we will actually introduce something that is new, or that's the extra S right there. I need to change it. Okay, so I think because I want to say passwordless, and so we are going to talk about passwordless system implementations. All right. So let's have an 8 minutes break, then we will come back and continue our lectures. Thank you. Okay, so I think time for me to continue the lecture. So just to check if any questions for the previous slides. If no, I will just continue. So at least for the second half for today, right? I actually want to mention passwordless system implementations. Although first of all, so don't worry because we are not asking you to implement passwordless system implementations for your project because it is already at least it's already passed through first half, and then you should have all the password requirements for your project, right? So that's why that's not a, so just to at least to let you know, actually you don't need to implement the passwordless system for your project. But however, I believe that this is a very, very important topic nowadays that I want to cover on why actually we need passwordless system and how passwordless system will change the future. If you implement, can you get higher mark? Oh, very, very good questions, I believe. So to say, as I always, I tell all the teams, right? You implement something, but however, you not implement it correctly, actually, it might become another security issue. Or B, if that you implement it and some of the teams find some vulnerable way for accessing your system, right? Then it will always become a challenge. So I will not say you will get higher marks, but you might need to ensure that you implement the password one correctly first. Okay, I don't know if you have enough time or not, but again, so that's why I don't want to say it is a compulsory for teams, because that's actually not covered in your security requirement phase as well. That means if you come up with something new, that means that your requirements might also need to change accordingly as well. So, but I will try to at least make sure that you need to understand this passwordless system so that you know how nowadays, although I will not say nowadays, but I believe that in the coming 5 or 10 years, I don't know if we will become famous or not, but the big giant is trying to promote this to all the web applications developer. Okay, so I believe that Prof. Tram should already mention about the Microsoft account can now go fully passwordless, right? So you can delete your Microsoft account password and Microsoft is not going to store your password anymore. Or actually last year, right, when iOS mentioned about iOS 15 and macOS 12, so they are also trying to implement passwordless feature as well, is that the user basically do not need to input a password when they want to log into a particular service. So in fact, before actually last month, people are trying to implement passwordless in different manners. So that's why I want to say is that there's different way to implement passwordless system, at least up to this moment. And why I want to share with you is that I also want you guys to think whenever which one is good or which one is bad. And I also want you guys to think more about how actually passwordless system works, which actually is something that I hope is new. So again, so we need to talk about iOS 16 and Android 15, right? So what they are trying to propose is that, okay, so you need to use that if you want to sign into an app or to a web system, you just need to use your Face ID, so which is your face, right? And then, where is my pen? So you can see here, right? So again, there's a term called passkey, which we are going to mention later on. So this is the way that they try to implement passwordless, is that they just use your Face ID as the authenticator. And for Google, right? So they are also bringing passwordless authentications. I think it's in May, right? So they are actually in the latest Chrome. They already mentioned that they are going to bring in the passwordless authentication support as well, which I'm going to mention later. So what you can see is that the latest Android and latest iOS just released it for iOS 16, just released it for a month, and Android 15 as well, right? Okay. So so that's why actually that's very important for us to mention about passwordless system nowadays. Okay, so then I should wear the SE part first, right? For this slides, we need to mention about why we need to have passwordless implementations. So why we need to have passwordless implementations from a software engineering student's perspective is that it's trying to improve user experience, particularly on mobile applications. Because right now, there's a lot of mobile applications. What you need to do is that you still need to type in your username and password to authenticate yourself as a legitimate user for using the applications. Even though if you can use the phone, right? By right, if you can unlock the phone by right, is it actually saying that you are the legitimate users of that particular applications, which is something that I will leave you guys to think about. But why we also want to mention about passwordless implementations is that, again, enhances securities, because password, as always, is a major vulnerabilities as users always reuse and are able to share they will also share the password to others, right? So users always reuse password and able to share them with others. And then if I know your username and password, I can already log into, for example, like your SIT account, right? As that's always the case. I ask CIT why there's no two-factor authentications for SIT faculty account, but they still rely on username and password. And then the answer they told me is that they do not have sufficient budget to implement those. I say, why? That's not the case, as always. So, and then last but not least, right, why actually passwordless implementation is good is that it actually reduces the cost of ownership. Because managing password, you know how expensive nowadays, right? Why I call it expensive is that you need to have a forgot password features, you need to have sort, and then you need to sort how you may also need to use a proper way to store the password in your database as well, right? So that's a lot of complicated process, and then you need to actually ask the users to fulfill certain complexity of the password as well. So that's why the cost to store the password is always expensive in terms of in a software development life cycle. So what actually is passwordless authentication? The principle is that, so what we only need maybe it's just a username, or maybe it's an email address or mobile numbers that you have, something you have. I hope you still remember, right? Then there are a lot of passwordless methodologies. For example, like your Face ID, the hardware token, OTP over SMS or email, right? But however, later on, I will also tell you they might not be a fully passwordless, but they require on so-called a token, or actually they require a 6-digit characters string for authenticate you guys, right? So it is actually, for nowadays, the latest implementations, it is already not considered as passwordless anymore, because you still need to validate using a link, or actually using a OTP, SMS OTP, or email address OTP, which is not up to the latest standards of passwordless implementations nowadays. Okay, Prof, which you think is better, digital token or hardware token? I will just answer you these questions later on, okay? But let me try to finish this slide first. So, what actually the concept or the key philosophy of passwordless implementations is to log in without the need of remember the password. So this is so-called passwordless. So users enter their mobile phone number or email address to receive a one-time code or link, which then lead them to use to log in. That means that, so you can see, for example, like one of the very, very classic example might be Telegram, right? So although if you enable the two-factor authentications, that is not the case, but how they authenticate you, for example, like WhatsApp and Telegram. So they require you to have the real phone numbers which you can receive the SMS, so that you can authenticate yourself to use that particular services. So what actually the key idea of passwordless implementations, the major huge concept is that database not store any password. So in the database, there's no such string for password or no sorted password kind of things to be sorted in the database. However, the application can still have a way to authenticate you. So, questions. Do you need 2FA if you implement passwordless? Dead silence. Some of them are saying no, some of them are saying yes. Optional. For sensitive transactions still need, can be helpful than more troublesome. Yes or no? So my answer is, if it is authentications, because it is actually something is already 2FA, right? Because it's something that you know is your mobile phone number or email address, and something you have your email address logged in or your SIM card or your phone to authenticate, right? So you might not need 2FA if we have such, but some of your classmates already say, right, it might be optional. That means that if there are some sensitive operations or sensitive transactions, they may still need users to authenticate themselves again. But however, in terms of login, right, you basically don't need 2FA, because 2FA is that initially something you know is your username plus password. But however, if it is a passwordless authentications, right, you're something you know actually is just your username or your email address or your phone number. So that means that you might not need 2FA if actually you are trying to implement passwordless. Okay, so this is also a very important concept. So you might actually, I believe that Prof. Chen should already mention those, right? For example, like you might consider to use sign in with Apple, sign in with Google, and sign in with Facebook. So, but not in your project, because as we always mention, right, if you're using a third party, basically you're throwing the reliabilities to the third party provider. And I tell you an example why I actually hate to use this kind of sign in with Google, Apple, or Facebook. It's mainly because, right, once upon a time, my Facebook, although I have a fake Facebook account, and sometimes I will use that fake Facebook account to log into some very vulnerable servers. And guess what happened, right? One day, actually, Facebook blocked my fake account, and then I cannot log into all of my vulnerable servers anymore because Facebook just suspend and disable my fake Facebook account. Then it actually screws up all the servers that I rely on to continue with Facebook. So that actually is the case, right? If I'm a user of those applications and then I say, oh, my account is blocked by Facebook, so I cannot log into your applications, then the developer will tell me we can do nothing because we throw the reliabilities to Facebook to do the authentications. And we cannot authenticate you as a legitimate user. And that actually is because of the case. So just to let you know why actually is a disadvantage of using such. Although I can tell you, because you guys might think this is beneficial in terms of user experience. But however, you can see, right, why there's always an options for register and sign in. It's mainly because if I'm a user, I don't want to use this kind of service. I can still have a way to register on my own. And actually, what is the benefits of having a own implemented register feature? Anyone can make a guess? I think this one SE student can answer, right? Some of the students actually want to start up though. So I think what is the benefits for having a self-developed register function feature? Oh, that's silence. Maybe just give me a thumbs up to see if my connection is good enough or not. Or I student feel free to answer as well. No, in terms of so if it is easy to implement, sign in with Echo, continue with Google seems to be easier than you. As I mentioned, right? Managing password is expensive. Then why I still need to have a register feature? Oh my God. Okay, so maybe because of the time constraint, I will just share with you, right? If you implement your own register features, sometimes if you are a application developer, which actually means that you can collect more user informations. Because if you're using sign in with Apple or Google, right? The only thing that you get might be actually a authenticated email address if you're using sign in with Apple. Remember, Apple actually can randomize the email address. So to be a iCloud.com or Apple Relay, something, right? Then you basically have nothing, you know nothing about the users, which sometimes you might need to take a balance is that, then how I can do advertisement or actually how I can send an email to a user. It is not possible at all if it is the case. So that's why, as always, there will be a register and sign in feature. So to say you always need to give the options to the user if they don't want to use their Apple, Google, or Facebook account to sign in, you should still allow the applications to have a register feature. That's why I always ask you to implement those, is because we cannot purely rely on those service provider. So to say, if their service down or they no longer provide you the service, that will become a problem for you guys, right? And I also want you guys to think about it as well. Okay, so passwordless connections, best practice. So what actually is best practice? As again, if you are using SMS and email as an authentication factors, right? Phone number sometimes might not be sufficient for user authentications because they can use one-time phone numbers or one-time email to do so, right? So email address procession sometimes is not sufficient for users authentications as well, because the user, as I just mentioned, not only one-time mobile phone numbers, but one-time email address can be used for if it is a very, very high-tech users. And then passwordless, what actually you need to do is that you might actually need to prevent phishing attacks as well. So you need to prevent if someone can manage to do false attack as well. Because you know, right, you need to also make sure that most recent or one-time password is issued and will only be accepted. So this is something that if your applications is using OTP, right, then you need to make sure how you can revoke the previous one-time password instead of you allow if the user can generate thousands of one-time password in a minute, then that one-time password is still legitimate for that 1 minute. Then I can just basically use any random OTP to gain access to your applications. So, and then once used, right, the latest one is also invalidated. That's something that you might also need to aware when you implement OTP as well, which I'm going to, I hope I will see those in your deliverable Q report as well, right? And then free failure attempt input any single input any single one-time use password are allowed. After this, a new code will need to be requested. Something that you might need to consider, because sometimes I may type the one-time password wrong, right? If I only type one-time password wrong for one time, you already revoke the OTP and request the user to send again. So this is something that I'm looking forward to see in your next report. And then the one-time password reissued should be valid for 3 minutes before expire, something that you might also need to think of as well. So this actually is considered as your implementations. All right. So next, what I'm going to mention is that this is actually I capture from the Apple WWDC. So which is something that I also want to share with you. I don't know how many of you watched. I think this is last year WWDC instead of this year's one, if I'm not wrong. But however, I also want to later on, I will also mention the security key as well. So again, maybe actually this is also good for me to answer the questions which you think is better, digital code token or hardware token. So for authentication methods, so the classic passwords that we already mentioned quite some time. What is the benefits? It's always easy to use and works on all the, not Apple, but all the device, and non-Apple device, okay, at least no matter what device it is, it will always work and always with you if you remember it, right? But sometimes some of you might actually forget your password easily. But again, security level, recoverable, phishing resistant, and also this is actually considered as a share secret, right? It basically is not good enough as a authentication methods, because you can see, right, it is recoverable. If I do brute force or I can forget password, I can reset your password as well, right? And it is not phishing resistant as well. So next will be the password managers, like the 1Password. There's a lot of password managing service. I believe that there's one slide from Prof. Tran mentioned that how many of you are using 1Password or those password managers, right? In fact, this is something similar to memorize the password. But however, security level is still not good enough, and then actually it's still recoverable, and actually it's not phishing resistant at all, right? If I can manage it to, because from thousands of different passwords, what I need to do is that if I have managed to find your passcode for the password managers, basically I can retrieve all your password already. Does it meaning that actually it's safe enough or not? It's always a pet question. So password plus OTP, which I believe that most of your team is trying to implement, I believe. So what actually is actually similar as well. The security level and phishing resistance is still possible to do so. So that's why actually it's not much difference compared to the memorize the password, but at least it is actually similar to the password managers in terms of the security level. So next will be the security key. So again, security key, non-Apple device, you can just leave it first. But something that, because some of your classmates mentioned, right, is a digital token or hardware token good enough or not, right? So this already answers your questions. So if it is a hardware token, you forgot to bring it, then it is something that is not always with you, all right? So to say, but however, it's phishing resistant, right? If I don't have your token, even I myself cannot actually log in. And then if it is a partial token, I basically don't require share the secret as well. So this is something that is a take. So last but not least, which I'm going to share the details of the pass keys, which actually now not only non-Apple device, but also non-Apple device are going to adapt pass key as well. So actually later on, I will tell you, even though although it's a exclamation mark, but it will become a text soon. Is that it can adjust all the authentications or risks or threats that we mentioned before. So which is something that why passwordless implementations is become more and more important in the coming days. All right. So again, example of passwordless implementations. So let's talk about the Google implementation as of nowadays first. I don't know, maybe you guys can give me a thumbs up, not only to see if my connections is good or you guys are still alive, but just to let me know if, give a thumbs up, you're using Smart Lock app for your Android or for your Google login. I should expect at least 160, right? Or only one? Only two, okay. Wow, no one know, anyone know about the Google Smart Lock app? Just curious. Just curiosity. Wow, only 2, 3. No, okay, wow. Okay, at least not familiar. So someone Google Authenticator is not Smart Lock. Google Authenticator is just to store the one-time password. Oh, there's a thumbs down already. Oops. Yes, Google has 2 passwordless app, which caused some confusion. So that's one called Google Authenticator, and that's another one called the Smart Lock. So that's why I want to tell you, this is called the Smart Lock, and this is so-called as actually considered as a virtual token. So what you need to do is that you need to enable Bluetooth on all the device, for example, your laptop and then your mobile phone as well. And then when you log into the Google service, what you need to do is to launch the Google Smart Lock app, and then it will actually allow Bluetooth, and then you can tap on the phone. So you're not using the, you have the Smart Lock app, but I end up using the tap and log in on phone features. Yep, that is the case. Later on, I will share you another slide which actually confuse you even more. Okay, but again, during the lab, I will always strongly encourage you to try this Google Smart Lock because it is considered as a hardware token. No, Google has a quicker already on Pickle phone that use Titan security. That one is another one. Yes. Oh, okay, at least it's good. So you can this. So I don't know. So because there's one pixel or off use the Titan one, which is even acting extra more confusion to you guys. But I will not go into the detail. Otherwise, as a student will be all confused. But what in this lecture I want to share is that at least I don't know how many of you are using Pixel phone. So Smart Lock at least is something that if you're using the Android phone or even an iPhone, you can use the Smart Lock app as a so-called virtual token to authenticate your Google service. So yes, so why now I will say it's confusions, right? Yeah, just now, Kevin mentioned about there's a tab on the login form, right? So in fact, there's a lot of four ways for you to sign in to Google. So what you need to do is that there's a tap yes on your mobile phone or tablet, or get a verification code from the Oracle Authenticator app, get a SMS message that the phone that you register, or enter one of the 8-digit backup code, which is something that how many of you are sorry? I believe that all of you should be using 2FA for Google, right? I hope any one of you store the 8-digit password code, backup code. Thumbs up if you manage to store it in a secure way. Thumbs down, you just store in your Google Drive or in your iCloud. Wow. Store in Telegram, even better. I love it. Okay. Okay. So again, there's always the case that why you generated the backup code. So if there's a backup code, right? There's something that I always, there's a case that when I do a pen test for one of the web applications, right? They have the backup code features. And guess what I can do, right? I can brute force the backup code, and actually there's no protections on the backup code at all. So that means that they do all the security protection for the login, for forgot password, but something that they always forgot is the backup code. In fact, I can brute force the backup code and then I can gain access to their system already, which is always the issues that there's something fun, so to say. Okay. So this is actually the Google implementations, and sometimes it might be confusing you, but I don't know how many of you know about that. Try that in your lab if you have time. Okay, so other than Google's implementations, right, there's another versions called the Apple implementations. So what actually Apple is using the two steps of authentications. They don't call it two-factor authentications, but they call it two-step authentications. Is that once the user successfully input the username and password, correct username and password, so he actually has to use another device to authenticate. So there's a sign-in requested. So sign in somewhere, and then what you can do is that you can press do not allow or allow. So subsequently, there's a Apple ID verification code, and then you need to enter this verification code for the device and sign in. My question is, so there's a question for you guys. Why I still need to input the passcode? Why I just press the allow, then everything works? Or 2FA or any other thing, but it is already 2FA, right? When I press the allow, because I already use another device to authenticate something that I have. Then why I still need to input this ID verification code as a design, in a security design? I'm not asking very complicated question, I believe, right? By directional 2FA. Okay, that's a good try. I will say correct, but why actually this is the case is that, right, consider a user, suddenly there's a pop-up box appear on your phone. You will, if you, by nature, sometimes you might accidentally press the allow button. So there's a user experience is that sometimes my mom, right, what everything that she saw on the pop-up box, right, she will just press allow. And that's the problem. So then if there's only one step, right, then if there's an attacker, then he can already gain access to it. So that actually this implementation is not secure at all. So that's why your classmate is mentioning correctly, is that there's a verification code, is that I need to type this verification code to make sure that the phone, or at least this phone is with me, or at least it's with me while I'm trying to log in another device and services. So that's smart. So I think that's what the case is, that always the case, right? If elderly or my mom, right, what they will always press is that, oh, they certainly saw a pop-up box, they will just press allow, and that will become a problem, right? So that's the reason why there's always a verification code in place to ensure that at least I will not accidentally click the allow button and then someone can log into my device already. I don't know, your girlfriend may suddenly allow and then press you allow your girlfriend to use your phone and then you press the allow and then will become a problem. I don't know. And also there is a Microsoft implementations as well. In fact, Microsoft also have a Microsoft authentication nowadays. It's so similar to the Google authenticator. But what actually the good thing is that it also still have the one-time password code that's available in case of some legacy services. They can still use the one-time passcode to log in. So and then they can also so all right. So again, so there will be some, at least it's similar to the Google authenticators, but what actually you can also do is that you can also review the reasons of the activity as well. I believe that actually seems it is much more comprehensive than the Google one, but this is something that you can consider. So Microsoft, actually this is the Microsoft implementations of the passwordless login and authentications. So Microsoft actually, what they did is that they approved sign-in has extra protections in case of users just press approve without awareness. So what actually they need to do for the Microsoft implementations is, I would say, is it actually better than the Apple's implementations, is that approve sign-in, tap the number you see below in your Microsoft Authentication app to sign in, and then you need to press the correct number. So what kind of attack it is trying to prevent? Again, is yes, you need to know, and then you need to see the password that you're currently using. So that means that it's a physical security, right? So the sniffing and then the surfing, and then at least to make sure that there will be no man in the middle at that, so that someone can actually log in on behalf of me, similar to the Apple implementations. So even it's a passwordless, we also need to make sure that the user should not accidentally click the allow or accept button, and then someone can already log into your account. So this is something that the app actually is trying, at least the implementation from Microsoft and Apple is trying to prevent. Okay, so this is actually appeared, I think it's already May 2022, which is just released 4 or 5 months ago. Is that Apple, Google, Microsoft commits to expand the support of FIDO standard, which is the last thing that I need to mention today, to actually accelerate the availabilities of passwordless sign-in. So now there is an official announcement that all the big giant is committed to expand the support using this FIDO standard for passwordless implementations. Why it is the case is because you can see, right, Apple, they implement their own way to do the passwordless, Microsoft another way, Google have so many ways, right? So there's actually no standard before they make this announcement of the FIDO standard. And now finally they sit together and then they come with a standard, and this is called the FIDO standard. And you can actually call it passkey. So they have a name called passkey. So that in the upcoming 15 to 20 minutes, what I'm trying to share with you is that is this FIDO standard. So FIDO Alliance. So what is FIDO? Actually, it's Fast Identity Online Alliance. So it's called FIDO. So ID, actually the D is here, ID, Fast FIDO. Alliance is an open industry association they already launched it quite some time ago already, say around 8 years 9 years ago, which their mission is to promote authentications that help to reduce the world's over-reliance on password. So that's something that why FIDO want to promote is that they want to support full range of authentication technologies. For example, like biometric fingerprint, Face ID, iris scanner, voice facial recognitions, trusted platform module TPM, USB security tokens, embedded security elements, smart card, and near-field communications. What they want to promote is that the ultimate goal for FIDO is that don't use password, use other way to do the authentications instead of password. And that's why they now finally, fortunately, all the big giants are coming here to propose a standard so-called the passkey. So what actually FIDO passkey is meant for is that passkey are actually a password replacement that provide faster, easier, and more secure sign into website and apps across a user's devices. So what actually is a passkey is that it is a discoverable FIDO credentials for passwordless authentication. So this is a very important term, discoverables. So the cryptographic keys are used from an end user's device, like all the device that they have, for them to use for the secure users authentications. So actually legacy authentication solutions, for example, like password manager, 1Password, iCloud keychain, Google password storage, password managers, right? So there's a password manager, one-time password, what we're trying to mention, OTP, email, SMS, that actually considered as one-time password, or the very, very traditional password, right, is not useful enough for large-scale consumer utilizations and cannot address all the security problems that I just mentioned to you guys. Okay, so then what I need to mention for FIDO is that I need to at least tell you what is the working mechanism of FIDO, so that you need to know from the registration, at least from the registration and the login phase, what actually is trying to do and how actually it is making the passwordless possible. First, when a user wants to register to a website or services or app, right, the user basically is prompted to choose the available FIDO authenticator that match the online service acceptance policy. So that means that they need to have a phone or they need to have a supported browser so that actually they can initiate the FIDO registration process. So what the user need to do next is that the users need to unlock the FIDO authenticator using a fingerprint, a button, or a second factor device, or actually they need to use a PIN or any other method that I mentioned previously. So what actually it has to do, right? So the user's device, and then that's the most important part, is that the user's device will then create a new public and private key pairs unique for the local device. Okay, I hope you guys still remember public and private key that mentioned by Prof. Tran, right? So, or if it is applied to cryptography, I believe that it should be something that you are extremely familiar with. So, and then what actually is that the online service and then actually the online service provider and also the user's account as well. So what actually it will be the next is that the public key will send to the online services associated with the user account, and the private key and any information about the local authentication method will never leave the local device. So that means that there's a register. And then what actually you need to do is that the user need to approve, and then the users basically need to scan a QR code, and all the key generations will be done on the device itself. And then the device will actually send the public keys to the service provider, the app or the website, and then it will actually store the keys of the users. The site basically need to store the public key of the particular users. But this process, what is the benefit? Is that the users basically don't need to remember anything, and they don't know where that actually the FIDO is trying to create a key and store on the server. Okay, so there's a question, need to know the website you are seeing is actually the website that has requested access. This is something that you might always need to be aware, right? Otherwise, you're creating a key for another website that you don't know. So there's something that I assume that actually is why, because the problem is as of what we mentioned before, right? We need to there's no way for us to authenticate or identify whenever there's a legitimate website or not. And it requires the user to check the URL and check the certificates whenever it is the correct one or not, which is always the problem. Okay, so what's happened during the login phases is that the online service, when the user need to log in, then actually the online service will challenge the users to log in with a previously registered device that match the service acceptance purposes. For example, like if it's using a FIDO authenticator, right? Then what the user need to do is that the users basically are not the FIDO authenticator using the same method as a registration type. And then the device basically use the user's account identifier provided by the service to select the correct key and sign the service challenge. That means that when it is login, right, the server basically will send a login challenge to the user. And the user need to authenticate themselves so that they are the legitimate user of that authenticator. If they are the legitimate or the users of the authenticator, then the app actually will select the correct private key to do the signing of the challenge. Once it is respond to the login, the applications, right? If the website can manage to use the public key that is created during the registration phases to authenticate, this is actually signed by the correct public key, right? Then it considered that it is a legitimate user of the applications. So the device basically sends the signed challenge back to the service, which verify within the stored public key and locks the user. So then if it is the case, right, then basically the users can manage to log in to the applications. So it's complicated, right? But however, this is how the FIDO sender work nowadays. So that means that somebody want to say they want to implement a passwordless FIDO authenticator, right? So in here, at least I mentioned how it works. And then it might be challenging when you're doing the implementation due to the time constraint. I don't know. But in the latest version of Chrome, right, actually there's already an implementation that if you are managed to use Chrome, it will already do a pop-up that the user basically use the phone to scan. So you use a passkey from other device to scan the QR code to use the passkey. So this is actually how the implementation of Google. I believe that this is just released in this release or in the upcoming release of Chrome. So this is the way that how Google implement the passkey. So okay. And then for Apple, right, in iOS 16, they already have the implementations of it. So how actually they implement it is that the website will generate a QR code. The mobile device will then scan the QR code and store in the local storage so that they manage to actually authenticate the users using this passkey. So this is actually the implementation of Google and Apple, but however, up to this moment, it's not mature yet. But I believe that in the upcoming days, more application or more website might adapt this implementation, although you might need to change their authentication methodologies. But this will become the upcoming 5-10 years so that I can reuse the slide all the time in the coming years. All right. So I believe that's all for today. It's good, at least I managed to finish on time. So any questions or comments? I believe that I answered the questions about a question for asking me a virtual token or a physical token, which is better or not, right? So nowadays, virtual token seems to be more convenient for a user, but I will say maybe hardware token is more secure. I don't know, but it depends on your implementations. Okay, so that's a question. Why the online servers never sign the user's public key and send it back during the next registrations? Then when you visit the website next time, user device can check whenever the website certificate authority match the signing authorities on the user's public key to prevent phishing. Yes, this is a very good question. It is actually also, I also want to bring up another problem of today's or nowadays certifications problem is that the certificate will expire and you need to renew, right? Then if you hard code or you record the certificate of a server, then if the server certificate is being renewed, then you cannot authenticate already. So I can't say it is a problem. I can't say it is the reason, but it is also mainly because of we always need to renew our certificate of a website, right? Then actually it also means that the certificate might need to be changed. So we cannot hard code the certificate in our applications nowadays at this moment. Unfortunately, this is the limitations for us today to authenticate a legitimate website or not. I hope I answered your questions. So again, phishing and man-in-the-middle attack is always common nowadays, not only because of actually the certification, the way of the certifications works nowadays. Okay, any other questions? Yes, I managed to finish on time. Why does so for practical tests, we need to set up Jenkins from scratch, then build tests and deployment as in the sample app. We will share with you more details later on, but you might need to at least aware that what you learn in your lab, right? That might be the case. That is something that you are going to learn or you should be trying to learn in your labs, right? Why everyone is so worried about the practical test? Okay, still around 3 weeks from now, no, more than 4 weeks from now, right? So again, what I would try to say is that make sure that you try to go through the lab, as well as I think most importantly, I want you guys to implement the Jenkins when you are doing your project so that you are familiar on the CI/CD, although it's not CD, but at least the CI process. All right. Chris result stage, but a lot of people, a lot of students get A though. I don't know. You might need to ask Brockchamp. How many A? Quite a lot. I can see it's quite a lot though. But anyway, again, I don't think the quiz is very difficult though, right? Maybe the practical test is more difficult. I don't know. But again, just do your best for your project, especially the project will do, because I am afraid that you only have around 3 weeks left for your next deliverable. Okay. So make sure that the team are fully utilize the lab sections to work within the team to continue to develop the applications. All right. So I don't think I have enough time, or actually that is something that is not my duty. So no, I'm just kidding. But we will see if we have time to go through some questions or common mistake for the quiz if times permit. So, but again, don't worry too much as of now. Okay, so if there's no more questions, then thanks for coming, and then I hope to see you all tomorrow, although there's COVID case keep increasing. But again, I just want to remind the team, actually not much time left for your deliverable too, although we give you guys more than 5 weeks, but I don't know. Some teams actually progress well, but some teams I saw that GitHub basically has nothing. So which already brings me some concerns already. Okay. Prof, how to prepare for the practical test? Make sure you go for all the labs that we're going to announce and those already being announced. How to prepare the practical test? What I will say is that if you work on your project, actually it's already considered as a preparation. All right. Okay, thank you so much for... No, I don't collect Gunpowder. Yeah, don't collect. Which lab is being announced for the test? I believe that 2 weeks from now. So, but at least you know the time, right? At least the time is on week 12 during the lab sections, I believe. So, but we will try to mention the details in maybe the next lectures. At least I will try to mention the details so that at least you guys know a little bit more about the practical test. Yeah, unfortunately, we are still preparing, so no choice. Okay. Thanks. See you guys.